Cool. So we have Jay Paterno here on the Unfiltered Truth to talk about college football, money, players, universities, and how it all is going to work together moving forward. How do we solve the issues facing college sports? With me, I have Phil Jones, Jay Paterno, and we're going to roll this thing out and get going. So thank you for coming to the program.
No problem. Good to be here.
College football, there's a lot of things going on. The lawsuit with that just recently got settled, the salary cap parameters, or all of the parameters that have been put in place. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think we've reached a point where we have to be honest about what we are. If you look at the Big Ten last year, the Big Ten made $1.1 billion in media rights from television media rights. That's not, this isn't a nice little extracurricular activity anymore for kids to do after class. So the money is very, very big. And everybody now realizes it. And, we have to stop pretending it's not. And when you start talking about the kind of money we're paying coaches, you can replace coaches. But, on game day, the players are the guys that everybody's coming to watch play the game. So I think we have to be realistic about what we are, and we have to treat it as such. It's an enterprise, and that's the reality of the situation.
Okay, and with NIL deals needing to be approved for $600 or more through a clearinghouse, how do we police this? I mean, let's be honest, college sports is not exactly the shining star for policing contributions to athletes.
Well, first of all, $600 is really low. I mean, if you have a clearinghouse that's going to approve every deal of $600, I mean, there are deals where an athlete in a town like Penn State, where a fast food place will give an athlete a $50 gift card every month if they tweet about going to eat there, and you're going to say now that that's $600, they've got to send that to a clearinghouse and get that approved. That seems pretty low, and they're going to have an awful lot of people that have deals like that they're going to have to deal with. So. What they're trying to do is create a sense of what fair market value is. You had 2-3 years ago, you had teams where the third left tackle that nobody knows and really isn't an NIL person would get $50,000 to tweet twice a month. That's a lot of money for a couple of tweets a month when you think about it, 50 grand. I mean, if you're going to make, say those tweets took you an hour to do, which we know they don't. So even if it's 24 hours a year, $50,000, you're making $22,000 and change an hour. And if you want to make that kind of money per hour and you don't make the NFL, you better go to law school or med school or someplace, and you're not going to make that kind of money for a long time. So that's not really fair market value. So I think people are trying to get to where fair market value is. So they're going to have, but it's all going to depend on players reporting what they're doing. And again, as we know from past history, even when we try and level the playing field, people find ways around it, and that's the way it goes. And if a kid doesn't self-report it, we may not know that the deal's going on.
No, for sure. And the whole employee aspect of universities and kids coming in to play specifically versus going to school, how would that work out?
Well, I think if you look at what's happened with NIL is this. It started out with the idea that, a high profile player is recognizable. They have a recognizable name, an image, and likeness. And a company says, we'll get a return on our investment if we put this player in a commercial. Like Caitlin Clark was in a State Farm commercial, or Juju Watkins was in a State Farm commercial this year. State Farm felt like we'll get a return on investment, or it's good for our brand, and so we'll pay them to do that. That's legitimate NIL stuff. What you also had is basically collectives being set up and giving every player a contract, essentially pay to play. Now, revenue sharing will kind of take that over, but that wasn't real NIL. It's what everybody calls synthetic NIL, where it was essentially pay to play. So now that'll go away, and that'll be revenue sharing. So I think that's how the business model is going to go forward. Now, the players that have legitimate NIL presence beyond that, they'll be able to get the deals they want to get. So I think that's how it's got to settle down, and that's what it's got to be going forward. And I think we'll see that because the collectives are all going to come in house with a lot of the universities. The universities will run them. I was part of a group that started Penn State's first collective, and because I was a trustee, I couldn't be involved financially, but we could set up the structure and give them the basis to do it. And then I stepped away from it, but those collectives became, we were doing things the right way, but a lot of collectives, it became just funneling money to kids to play and get them to transfer and that kind of stuff. And there was a lot of tampering going on, which I think will happen again anyway.
Absolutely. And you said a couple things that I wanted to touch on, so we'll start with them in order. So the first, when we first brought up the NIL, interestingly enough, you brought up two women. And for what we know about what it is, with the amount of money that's being set aside, how do the women fit in with that?
In terms of revenue sharing?
Yes. Well, not just revenue sharing, but we'll call it the breakdown of salary caps. And the reason why I want to keep that separate is I'm going to get back to revenue sharing.
Gotcha. Well, I think the NIL, schools will have a certain amount of money NIL, and they can dole that out however they want. And I think what you'll see is, if Pepsi or Coca-Cola has a deal with a certain school, the schools will then say, well, we want to take X amount of that dollar that you're paying to be our exclusive partner or whatever it is, and we want to put Coke cups in our stadium and put these athletes on it, and we'll give those athletes money to be on these cups or on the team poster or whatever it may be. Now, how much they do that with the women's sports versus men's, I think that remains to be seen. And then because there's really no Title IX guidance on that right now, because the current administration does not believe that Title IX is important as it relates to the NIL and the revenue sharing, whereas the Biden administration actually was going to make sure it all fell under Title IX. But there's no question that women's athletes are very high profile right now. I don't think there are very few male athletes that have made the kind of money Livy Dunn has made at LSU as an athlete. And she has a great presence on social media. I mentioned two of the women I mentioned were basketball players. I think you're going to see more and more of that. It was Paige, I think it was Bruckers at UConn had a Gatorade deal. Yeah. And I think what you're seeing is brands are realizing that there is value in marketing women's athletes because more and more women are playing sports. Just for example, last weekend, the Women's National Football Conference had their full contact football championship game on ESPN2. And that's a national league. So you're seeing all these sports people starting to pay attention, and the brands are all seeing that.
Absolutely. You got anything you want to say real quick before I get to the next point, Jones?
The back, could you break down the back pay? Was it $2.8 billion for some of the former college athletes?
Yeah. Unfortunately for me, it didn't go all the way back to the late 80s. So, I mean, I'm not going to see any of that cash.
I needed to ask you that because I had a former player, Anthony Kennedy. He was asking me, I told him, I was like, yeah, we're going to talk to Jay Paterno about this. He was like, man, ask him about that back pay, man.
Oh, no question. So I mean, for some reason, the statute of limitations ends at 2016, because I know there were some Michigan athletes that tried to sue, and it was thrown out because it was before 2016. So apparently there is a limit, which is, unfortunate. Not that I was worth that much NIL wise. But I think the thing that's tough is, for schools, some of these schools are going to be paying $10 million a year for the next 10 years to pay that settlement out, to pay for that. So that's going to be tough on a lot of schools to come up with that $10 million a year for the next 10 years. And, at a place like Penn State, we are in the top 10 revenue wise in the country in terms of athletics revenue. But if you look at what we do from a profit loss standpoint as an athletics department, not football, not basketball or ice hockey, to all make money for us. But from the athletic department, we're generally break even. And now we got to come up with $20.5 million a year for revenue sharing when we're breaking even right now. That's new expenses, and $10 million in back pay. So now you start to look at it and say, where are we going to find $30.5 million a year for the next 10 years? So this is going to be a challenge for a lot of people going forward.
No, that's really interesting, especially your smaller schools, as you stated. And then because I'm trying to remember, do the revenue that you guys make, does that coincide with the revenue that you get with let's say like you're being shown like a live game on like certain networks and all?
Yeah, like when you look at the Big Ten as the contract, and we are with Fox, NBC, and CBS.
Yeah.
So those contract and the Big Ten Network, and those contracts, they own all the games. So they show them, and the Big Ten gets $1.1 billion out of that contract. Every school gets somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 million or whatever it may be, because there's 18 schools now, and also the Big Ten Network takes a cut of that. So it's really split 19 ways. So, I mean, so that's kind of how it all breaks down for everybody.
Okay.
That's actually where I was going next, because I was going to say, with the amount of revenue that you had mentioned 1.1, and I did the math as well, but you broke it down for us to about 65 million per school. That would make up the balance in theory, right?
Well, when you look at Penn State breaking even, that includes that money. So that includes all that money. Yeah. So this isn't on top. So we're not going to have 65 million laying around to do this. That's already spent money. So like when you look at our football program, if you go back to the start of the last decade, 2011, 2012, roughly, if you take the TV money out of it, you play the games, you sell tickets, you park cars, you sell concessions, all that stuff, just playing the games, we had about a $24-25 million profit. We brought in about 48 million, spent 22, 23, somewhere in that ballpark. If you fast forward to this past year, without the TV money,
Right.
we brought in about 61 million and spent about 63 million. So the expenses on football have almost tripled in about 10, 12 years. So without the TV money being thrown in there, because we allocate a bunch of that TV money, I think it's roughly 80% of that money goes into football's budget. So we can show football made $45 million in profit, when in reality, the TV contract is what really gives us the profits in there. And I think 85% of that Big Ten money we put into football's budget, 15% we put into men's basketball's budget. And we don't really budget that into any other sports, even though they're all on TV. But it's just accounting. I mean, it's all going the same athletic department. But accountants realize the more complex they make it, the more you got to pay them.
Of course.
Yeah.
Everybody got to justify their employment.
Yes, and lawyers, they love to talk because the meter's running. It's like they're getting in a cab.
By the second.
Yes.
So with you saying that, using Penn State as the example, breaking even, you just sell tickets, you sell, you got with parking, you got even
merchandise.
So much. I'm just adding it all up.
Yeah.
So is it a possibility that you might see a price increase in, like, let's say maybe memorabilia, maybe ticket costs?
Yeah, there are schools that are adding surcharges now to tickets to pay for the revenue sharing. Ticket prices are going up a bunch of places. People are trying to create platforms. Penn State's trying to create a platform of content that you have to pay for. Starting at $15 a month and tiered all the way up to $250 a month. I said, well, $250 a month, they better tell me who wins the game ahead of time, for God's sake. I mean, geez, $250 a month. At a time, everybody's trying to get less subscriptions every month on their TV, with the stuff that we're adding. But I mean, it's all meant to try and get more money. So I think there is a fatigue level with fans that are going to start to say, well, wait a minute, you want me to pay for this subscription? You want me to pay a little bit more for my tickets? You want me to pay for the Big Ten Plus so I can watch games and Peacock? so I can watch games, and Paramount Plus so I can watch games. And then you want me to give money to this collective, and I'm a guy who's working, a blue collar job in Pennsylvania, maybe making 70, 80 grand a year, and you want me to give money to a collective so the starting quarterback who makes $2.2 million a year can get a nicer car. They're going to start to look at this and go, you know what? I'm checking out. I'll stay home and watch the games on TV because I can get a, massive TV for $800 or whatever it is and feel like I'm there.
So I'm going to be evil on this one right here. Add in a sports book.
Listen, don't.
Why not?
You know what? I mean, it's getting down now. It's coming down, crawling into that point of like you got.
Oh, you guys are not as old as I am.
Bro.
You guys are not as old as I am, but you're old enough to remember. Like, you did not talk about point spreads on college football. It was taboo. You did not talk about it. Now it's, hey, here's my luck. You got prop bets. And you could do it on a phone.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you can bet that Nick Singleton is going to run for 100 yards. Pardon?
I said in certain states, you can't gamble in California.
But I mean, like in Pennsylvania right now, if you are in the state of Pennsylvania, you can bet on your phone. And you start to think about, well, you saw it with the NBA with the prop bets where the guy just took himself out of games. Oh, I'm hurt. My knee hurts. I'm not going to get to that 10 points. I got 8 and I'm hurt. And now they find out he's rigging things. I think there's no question, that there is a major gambling scandal in the next 2 or 3 years in college athletics. It's too easy.
Yeah.
It's too easy to do. And they don't have to fix the game anymore. All they got to do is make sure they don't rush for a certain number of yards or beat. You got these games early on the year, like Penn State's playing Villanova in football. And, pretty easy to keep that, if the spread's 48 points, not that hard to have a backup quarterback throw a late pick 6 to make sure the spread they don't cover the spread. No one's going to notice if they win by 48 or 46, no one's going to care. And look, we've seen it before gambling was so prevalent. Now, I don't think there's any question you're going to have some problems.
It's laying itself out there. Like you said, like you look at the whole thing with Malik Beasley, and then it was a few other players, and you look at a few other players from out of the NFL.
Yeah, it's too easy. I coached a guy named Michael Robinson at Penn State who ended up playing for the 49ers and the Seahawks. He's on NBC. Yeah. And the NFL is hyper vigilant. He was telling me he got a call. They asked if he had joined a certain gambling site. It was somebody with the same name. It wasn't him. Because Mike's not the kind of guy who would ever messing around with it. Mike's dead serious about everything he does, except his podcast. Except for his podcast with Marshawn at Lynch. That is not dead serious. And entertaining as hell. But anyway, I mean, like he said the NFL is all over it. I mean, they are monitoring it like crazy because the sanctity and the integrity of the game is if that goes away, people lose faith in the institution pretty quickly.
Yeah. So now you come back to the point of if you go with it, you take the same strict methods of what the NFL is doing.
Oh, I think you have to. And I have had that discussion with other members of our board of trustees and said, look, guys, what safeguards do we have in place? Do we have the safeguards in place? Are we checking? Are we constantly monitoring? Are we educating our players about what they can and can't do? So I think those things are all really, really important. But I think it goes back to some of the things that we talked about. We talk about a constitutional convention for college athletics. These are all things that need to be addressed. I mean, there is nobody in charge right now. They're letting every lawsuit kind of dictate where they go. They're letting litigation state by state dictate where they go. They're waiting for Congress to try and put something together. And, you know, they can't even agree on, you know, getting Congress to do anything is hard enough. And they've got more important things to do right now than figure out what college sports is going to be. Right. And we certainly don't want to lay it up to a presidential, executive order, because God only knows where that's going to land. And that'll end up in court, too. So it would be nice if we got people who are administrators on boards of trustees, as well as presidents, as well as athletes and athletic directors and coaches in a room, and started to say, okay, how do we address gambling? How do we address academic integrity? How do we address academic progress towards graduation? Are they employees? Do we have collective bargaining? What about Title IX? And we need to literally sit there and, like they did in the late 1700s, come up with a constitution that sets the course of where we want to go. And until we do that, we're just reacting to events under other people's control.
So now that's a great premise, and actually something that really, because once they said that the NCAA was no longer enforcing policy, I had that very same question of who's running things. So, and from what I gathered, from what I read, the schools are supposed to be policing themselves.
Right now, what they're talking about is creating a organization that will police. They'll set up a group that will police the NIL and revenue sharing, and the schools will all sign on to it. Supposedly, they're going to have subpoena power, and I'm sure that will get challenged in court at the first time they go after somebody. But it's all generally around the NIL and the revenue sharing stuff, and it's not really about the academic side. So, you know, how much teeth will what kind of teeth will they have? We'll see. And again, you know, the generation of athletes that are still in high school, some of whom will have some of your high profile high school athletes, not some of them, most of them already have some sort of NIL deal. And they're going to come to college and say, wait, I got to give up my NIL deal because I have to follow these new rules. Well, that's not, I didn't agree to this setup of this. I wasn't part of this class action suit. And on the other side, you know, when you talk about what the NCAA can and can't do, I think there's a basketball player at Vanderbilt that's suing the NCAA now because the NCAA is saying, look, you can't play anymore. And he's basically saying, well, I'll make more money in NIL and revenue sharing staying in college than I could by playing overseas. So you can't limit me to 5 years of college because that's restraint of trade for me. And I'll take classes and I'll go to grad school, whatever it may be, but I still want to be able to make this kind of money that I can't make anywhere else. So even the 5-year limit is probably going to come under scrutiny. So everything is on the table right now because the NCAA has literally lost they've lost more games in a row than the team used to play the Harlem Globetrotters every night. Or they're the Washington Generals, I think, right?
In my lifetime, they've won one time. And when they did, it was just like, oh my God, they beat them.
Yeah.
Pretty sure everybody on the Globetrotters got fired after that, but that's another story. Wow. So I want to go back, and you had mentioned something about Penn State being top 10 in terms of revenue in the country. So what happens to the schools who aren't making that type of money, and in the back payment of the settlement for the schools that can't afford to come out of pocket for that roughly $30 million? What are they going to go under? What happens to them?
Well, that's a big question for a lot of people, and they're appealing to their alumni. They're trying to find really creative ways. There is now a lot of talk about private equity coming in and putting money up front to help schools get through this the next 10 years, and then they would, with the idea that these private equity groups would come in and try and create more. To find ways to increase revenue for them that would then pay these loans back. There have been numbers as high as $400 or $500 million for some schools. I think a private equity group valued Michigan's brand at essentially franchise at roughly $1 billion, and said, you know, if we wanted to buy 50% of it, we put up 450 million or so to Michigan. But again, that's not free money. You got to then pay that money back over time, or they're going to want profits, or they have part ownership. So I mean, there's going to be a lot of things that go on, and the minute you bring that in house, now you're in a whole different ball game, because you got essentially stakeholders or stockholders essentially that say, look, we own 45% of your brand. And we want to make sure we get our money back out of this thing. So
right,
it's really complex. And again, that's another reason why there needs to be some national leadership on this.
yeah,
and it's just not there right now.
Right then and there, that could put a school in debt.
Yep.
Cause the school to probably shut down, file for bankrupt. Man, that's when you really
nobody's quite taken that deal yet. But I'll give you an example. When you look at what we've done at Penn State and a number of other schools, is we have privatized our ticket operations to where an outside group has come in and given us a big chunk of money up front. That's essentially a private equity deal. It's essentially someone giving you a chunk of money to buy your operations, and you're going to be paying that money back to. They don't just give that to you. They're going to be taking that out of, a little bit like the mafia. They skim their part off the top before they give you your cut, and then they hand you, and that's really what some of these deals are like. And people have done that for ticket operations, concessions, all that kind of stuff. So it's not totally new, but it may be in numbers that we have not seen before.
So it probably was like, oh yeah, we're taking like 15%. Now we're looking at about 35-40%.
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of excitement about that about a year ago, and it's been tempered a little bit because a lot of the private equity people have said, well, we don't know if these players are employees. We don't know if they have collective bargaining. We don't know where this is all going to land. So we're not going to bet our money on this until we have a general idea as to where this is going to go. I think, where do you find the money that you need to pay these things? I think coaches' salaries, and I say this as a former coach, coaches' salaries are too high right now. If you look at if a football program is bringing in $80 or $90 million and the head coach is making $9 million, that coach is making 10% of gross revenues, not profit, gross revenues. You cannot find another industry anywhere that's worthwhile where the one employee is getting 10% of gross revenues. Maybe Pablo Escobar had that deal back in his day, maybe more. But I mean, right now, if you talk about somebody making 10% of gross revenues, that's not a business model that's really sustainable, especially when you look at now having to come up with $20.5 million in revenue sharing.
I'm putting numbers in my head right now.
Different. The numbers are way different than when I was around. That's for sure.
Ooh. So, and as a member of the board of trustees, it falls on your shoulders to navigate through all of this, and not only this particular where we are now, but the course for the future and how you're going to continue to keep Penn State on top. Correct?
Oh, there's no question. Now we're not involved in day to day, but certainly we are in charge of the business model of the entire university. Now you look at Penn State, we are in almost $10 billion a year in our health system. All these things. So athletics is 2% of that, 2.3% of that, but still, it's a very high profile situation. When you talk about stadium renovations in the neighborhood of $700 million. That we're borrowing the money for, you can get your university in trouble pretty quickly if you're not on top of your stuff.
Wow. That's something.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, that's why I think it's important that trustees and people that are governing boards and universities need to be involved in the process going forward.
Absolutely.
Because when you look at what happened with the Big Ten, we were essentially, our governing board was essentially informed that USC and UCLA were joining the league. And then we were essentially informed that there was a deal done for Washington and Oregon to join the league. There was no discussion at the trustee level of what does this mean for travel for our student athletes, expenses for going out there and playing games, not just in football, but you talk about all the sports we have now are making West Coast trips every year. There's a lot of things that were not discussed. And what does that mean to our athletes when they're leaving on a Tuesday to play a volleyball game at UCLA on Thursday and a volleyball game at USC on, Saturday, and getting home, Sunday, and they've been gone for 5 days. So, there's a lot of things we didn't have a discussion about. And even with what's going on with this settlement, there was not really a discussion in our governing board about, are we okay with this? And if we're pulling out of the NCAA, that's a pretty big step if all of a sudden we're going to let ourselves be governed by this other governing body. And those are things that probably should be decided by governing boards more so than people, presidents of universities, ADs of universities, football coaches, basketball coaches. They all have agents, and they are going to wear whatever logo pays them the most money. Whereas, if coaches jump around or ADs jump around or presidents jump around, the governing board's we're the ones left holding the bag if they do some things that don't put us on a sound financial footing.
No, for sure.
Wouldn't you just love to just be talking about like what people can do on 3rd and 5 anymore?
That used to be the talk. It used to be the talk like, okay,
yes, now you got an NBA.
Oh, we're gonna run a play action. We're gonna run a screen here, or you know what? We're just gonna put the fridge in the backfield and just say screw it. We're gonna run it up the middle and surprise everybody.
Now you got to be a CPA to be involved in college athletics. Everybody's getting GMs. Everybody's getting salary cap people. I mean, it's crazy. It is. And I think my worry as somebody who coached the game for 22 years, a guy who grew up around the game forever, I worry about the future of the game simply because of, there was something unique about college football as opposed to the NFL. You didn't talk about money like this. And that was kind of the neat thing about it. Now that's gone. And fans are not happy because their favorite player jumps to another school. The quarterback at Tennessee says, well, you know what? I need more money. And he leaves the school and goes to UCLA, because he wants to go somewhere else. And I think that there's going to be some fatigue as it relates to fans and that don't like the way the system is, unless you get a better governing structure. I think you got a real problem.
Yeah. And then you just said one thing I was thinking about, a college team having a general manager.
Yeah, it's not the first one either.
Because I'm thinking about, Jim Nagy, he's over at Oklahoma. I used to cover the Senior Bowl a handful of years, and then talking to him, then like one day, all out of the blue, he's like, yep, I'm gone.
Yeah, and some of these guys are making almost 7 figures. I mean, they're paying these guys an awful lot of money. And when you look at it, one thing I think Belichick will have a little bit of an advantage of in North Carolina is, he knows where to put your money. He knows you better have a quarterback, you better have pass rush, and you better people can protect the quarterback, and that's where you put your money. When you look at the Patriots over the years, they didn't always have the Hall of Fame wide receiver. I don't know if they even had a Hall of Fame back with Brady. But you know what? They knew Brady could throw the ball. They knew they could protect him, and on defense, they were going to get after the other guy. I mean, you look at the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles, as well as Barkley played in the Super Bowl, as well as Jalen Hurts played in the Super Bowl, they won that game with pass rush, and they put their money where their mouth is. And if Penn State right now this year, they're paying 2 running backs. That may pay off. It may not. But I mean, when you start talking about a salary cap, if you're putting that kind of money into one position, you better hope you got some guys that want to play offensive line, maybe at a discount for you, because that's, doesn't matter. Barkley is a great, great player. There's no question, but he was a lot better player with a great line in front of him in Philly than he was in New York, and stayed a lot healthier. And, Now that reverse hurdle thing he pulled off, I mean, that was him alone, obviously. But I mean, he got to that point because he had a great line in front of him. And he'd be the
Right.
first to tell you that.
Right. And so we've been on for quite a while, and I appreciate all your time. And I got a doozy of a last question for you,
Okay.
and we'll see how much of an answer I get. So you had mentioned something about schools pulling out of the NCAA, and ultimately that is their final trump card as well, because the business of college football, the demand for college football is never going to go anywhere. The business of the NCAA will, not ultimately, because we're currently there right now, will handicap college football. So let's say a major university in, I don't know, the Big Ten was looking to pull out of the NCAA. Where would they go? What would happen?
Well, I think that's the question right now. I think right now the commissioner, the biggest problem right now is the commissioner of the SEC and the commissioner of the Big Ten. Right now, they have an advantage when they go to TV networks, and they can make more money for their teams than everybody else can. And with that money, they see a financial advantage that then becomes a competitive advantage. Why do USC and UCLA want to be in the Big Ten? Because they're going to get a lot more TV money, and they think that's going to help their football program to do those things. So right now, those two commissioners hold the cards. They're demanding certain things in the college football playoff. The biggest money out there right now is in college football, when in terms of total dollars. But the NCAA has March Madness, which everybody wants to be a part of, and that's the established brand. So that's going to be the thing that kind of keeps everybody anchored in the NCAA. The question is, can the head of the SEC and the head of the Big Ten get together with a certain number of other conferences and say, hey, let's put on our own basketball tournament? Now, will they find TV partners that'll put up the kind of money that they'll get out of the NCAA? Probably not. Will they find that, will they want to run that tournament? Because there's the logistics and all those things that are involved. And, if you look at, UConn won the title two years in a row, and they're not in those Power Four conferences. So do you want to walk away from teams like that? So it'll be curious to see. But, I think at some point, if the NCAA does not adapt, I think their days are numbered, because these schools will start to say, we can start to do some of these things on our own, and we're willing to take that chance. And there's always going to be TV people that'll put up money for content. And there's always, for NBC or Fox or ABC, CBS has locked down March Madness for so long. They'd love nothing better than to say, you know what? We got the Power Four conferences. We'll put our own basketball tournament on, and, we'll do it ourselves. So we'll see.
I just realized something. Navy football players are not, I cover Navy football as well as the Big Ten with University of Maryland, and I just realized Navy their players can't really benefit from the NIL deals.
No, but they do go to school for free, and they do get paid.
That's true.
So, they do kind of have that in there. They do kind of have that in there. So, there's a little bit of that for them. Although if there's one set of student athletes who we should be paying, it's the service academies.
Yeah.
Hats off. They're making a commitment to that is not the NFL after they're done playing, and not the NBA.
Because you got to look at what? Navy, Army, Air Force.
I think it's 4 years they have to give afterwards. So.
Yep. It's good to see a couple of these guys being able to get drafted, or they're on a roster right now and they can kind of play it out, and then afterwards just do your 4 years. Hopefully they're behind like a desk, not having to really go out in the field.
Yeah. Well, hopefully everything settles down so we don't have to put anybody in the field that much.
I pray to God.
Who knows? Who knows?
Right. You got anything else for Mr. Paterno there, Jones?
No, I mean, it's an honor to be able to speak to him. Just watching the history, you coaching over at Penn State, man.
It was a great time in my life, man.
I bet. I could only imagine what that was like for just as a guy who loves football to be able to coach with my dad at a storied university with having the type of success that you guys have had over the course of the years. You brought up the names of some of the athletes that you've coached, so your history goes far back and it's recognizable even as far back as it goes. That's just amazing. It would be amazing to me.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about it was certainly, coaching, the games and stuff are great, but the lives we were able to change over the years. I mean, some of the guys that came in from nothing and then, all of a sudden they get an education and they then become NFL players. And then after they're done in the NFL, the what they're able to do with their lives afterwards. I mean, we got a guy named Aaron Maben who played for Penn State, who is in inner city Baltimore, changing people's lives every day. And you just look at that and say, it was such an honor just to have just a little bit of an impact on a life like that and what he's done for other people. We have guys like that. There's a guy I played with at Penn State who, he made a bunch of money in Goldman Sachs. He and his wife are building schools in Uganda and getting kids out of there and going to universities in Europe and stuff. And that's what you really love about the game. And I hope that as the game goes forward with all the talk about money and all the talk about my NIL deals and revenue sharing, that we don't lose the way that game can impact other people's lives. We're able to help people transform their own lives and then pay that forward by seeing them do some of those same things. Those are the things you really live for when I coached.
No, absolutely. Can I still look at how you guys rallied around one of your players? I believe it was Adam
Talafero, yeah.
Talafero.
Yep.
I watched that story on, I saw that game as a kid, and then, you go back and you watch the documentary on the Big Ten Network, and that really hit me in the heart,
Yeah.
That.
I mean, those are the things that people, that same year, we had a quarterback named Rashard Casey. And Rashard was a black quarterback from Hoboken, New Jersey. He went home and he was falsely accused by the police of assaulting an off-duty officer. And the political and the media pressure for us to kick him off the team when we knew he was innocent, and Joe stood by him. I stood by him because I was coaching him. And, I look back at that and say, you know what? I'm as proud of that as maybe anything we ever did, because we stood up to the system because we knew what was going on was wrong. And the team rallied around him and we all learned a valuable lesson. And after my dad died, we were going through his files and there was a note where basically Joe said, if it costs us a couple of wins to stand by him and to stand up to some crooked law enforcement, those are games I'm willing to give away to do the right thing. And those are the things that really stick out all these years later. Those are the kind of things that I'm most proud of. I mean, you talk about all the wins. Yeah, that's great. Because everybody wants to win. But when you really are willing to stand up for people and do the right thing, or rally around a guy like Adam Talafero, or help people go on to in life to change other people's lives, that's the reason you get into college coaching. Really is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Paterno, thank you for your time. This has been quite insightful. You've spun my head around multiple times and caused me to think about things and numbers and the grand and that I'm not used to processing. That's a lot of zeros when you start talking about billions.
Yes, no question. Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Really enjoyed it.
All right, cool.
Appreciate you.
Thank you all for tuning in. As always, please like, subscribe, give us that unfiltered salute, drop a comment, share it, tell a friend. And once again, one more time, thank you, Jay. And we are out. Sounds good.